Hello, everybody. This is Brian O'Haron again. Referendum 4 coming up a week from Saturday, October 27th. Pearson, I guess it's from 8 to 8. Try to get there and vote if you can. Well, I've got some pets here with me tonight. I brought in some of my pets. And they produce a lot of wool. I brought these sheep in. They're making a lot of noise here in the studio. You could probably hear it when we started the program. But I brought these sheep in tonight because the majority on the Board of Finance is trying to pull the wool over your eyes on these referendums. They keep saying that reval won't affect our budget until next fiscal year, which is true. We actually won't see an increase, reval increase, a mill rate increase of the possible 21% until the next budget. We've always said that. Fiscal year 13-14. But we've also always said that it's very, very important to start planning for that now. To have a budget that is a little more responsible than the one put forward by the present majority on the Board of Selectmen. The two fiscal conservative Republicans voted no, don't put this budget forward. And one thing gets people's attention, especially on the lake and in Winchester and around town and the businesses and people who have a lot of money invested in our town. One thing that gets their attention is high taxes. One of the things that will hurt the town the most is high taxes. The high taxes will scare a lot of businesses away, will force people to sell their homes and leave town, responsible people that are good for the community, and probably force the prices of properties to go down to the point where people want to invest in our town because the prices are low enough and the taxes on that particular new purchase will be much lower than they would be now or in 2013-14. But this all takes an awful lot of time. So I came on tonight because I saw some letters flying around and some programs that I never watched, but I heard about when people are trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the taxpayers. They don't realize how hard that is to do. Taxpayers are very smart. They own the town. We couldn't do anything without their money. They know the value of, they all know Ben Franklin. They know the value of a penny. They know the value of a nickel, a dime, a dollar, and millions of dollars. That gets their attention. They also know when they don't see any progress, when they see money being paid in taxes for the status quo, with no improvement in the town. A couple of the majority selectmen, the two ladies, they've been on the Board of Selectmen for 10 years each, one way or another. So they should be the last to blame anybody else. They've been in power now over the last 6 years or so. And then there was one term before that with the Republicans in charge. And there was a term before that when this majority was in charge. So they've been involved an awful lot, a lot of years here. And they should have produced some results, especially on the revenue side. So I will begin again here. While you were taking a look at my pet sheep, I'm going to just say that I'm really a revenue guy. That's why in 2006 I started to study the town. I actually studied a few years before that and tried to convince everybody in town, boards, commissions, etc., to try to get more additional profitable recurring tax revenue into town so we wouldn't be in the predicament we're in today. Try to avoid that. Plan ahead. Not wait for the, problem to hit you right in the square in the face like it's doing now. And guess what? A couple of the majority selectmen, the two ladies again, were against these plans for these developers to come to town. They'll give you all kinds of reasons for it. But they were against it. So now they're hoisted on their own petard. They're in charge of a finance board that doesn't have any money. And that's going to have a heck of a hard time getting the money. It's not going to be easy for the next 10 years, especially when this reval rate goes up, as we expect it to. So tonight I'm going to talk a bit about the reval numbers, just basic, down-to-earth numbers that I hope everybody in town can understand. People that are paying attention have no trouble understanding it. That's one of the reasons why the budget has gone down 3 referendums in a row by a substantial majority, because the voters understand the problem. Now, they won't fall for the fake. The fake is, well, we have a zero budget now. We're giving you a zero budget. That's a fake. We will get a zero budget, but there's a storm coming right ahead of it. We'll know December 1 how big that storm is. Somewhere between the middle of November and the 1st of December, other towns in Connecticut that are on the same time scale we are for reappraisals, or some of them are going to know sooner than December 1st. Maybe we'll get lucky and know that as well. But the worst case, by December 1, we should know. So we're all saying, the fiscal conservatives across all parties are saying, don't let them pull the wool over your eyes. Don't be led like sheep and lemmings, which you'll see towards the end of the program. Think for yourself. Do some calculations. And I'll help you tonight by giving you some of the rules here. And then we have to come up with a budget after this referendum that addresses the major issues in the town. In the middle of this dire problem, we still have one selectman asking for a new school up on the Gilbert campus. Now, everybody wants a new school, no argument with that, if necessary. Maybe we should join other regions, maybe not. But now is not the time to be looking for another $30, $40 million for a school. Now is the time to get our own house in order, get to the point where when we ask for money from the taxpayers, we spend it wisely and we invest in our future. Unfortunately, we'll have to reduce a little bit. We'll have to restructure, and we'll have to reinvest. But that's what everybody has to do. I talked to a businessman today who was restructuring his business because it isn't the same as it was a few years back. I've talked to many businessmen in the last 2 weeks, and a lot of them are in the process of doing the same thing. Scaling back, trying to invest in the parts of their business that will help them in the future and will allow them to get to the future. That's happening all over this area, and my own view is that the majority of selectmen should be aware of this. They shouldn't be trying to pull the wool over your eyes. So let's not follow them like sheep. You know, there's an old saying here, and you know, we had a lot of Indians around here in the early days, and I went to Kansas, in school in Kansas, where Haskell Institute is, and there were a lot of Indians in Lawrence and on the campus, and they were friends of mine, a lot of them, some of them very famous today. And they used to say, Brian, the old Indians used to tell us that white men speak with forked tongue. Now, I don't think white men speak with forked tongue. Maybe the old Indians used to think that, and maybe the white people used to think they spoke with forked tongue. I don't know. But I do know one thing. Majority of our selectmen speak with a forked tongue. They know that they should be preparing now for the storm that's coming after December 1. They know that. They're trying to convince you that you should vote yes for a substandard budget, even though it's a zero increase, which is good for you, but not good because it doesn't, there's no restructuring, reinvesting, taking from Peter to pay Paul, and to try to bootstrap ourselves out of this condition we've been in for many, 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 many years. This is just forced upon us by the recession and by lousy management, to be frank with you, over many, many years. We all know that. So anyway, I think the majority here speak with forked tongue, and that you shouldn't listen to them. You got to be very careful. They say one thing and mean another. They say one thing and do another. When they ran for office, they said one thing. Now they're doing the opposite. So you need to be very careful about it. So now I'm going to go to the first slide. Hope you can read it there. I'll read it to you just in case. I'm going to explain that the appraisal, the revaluation that occurs every 5 years, the appraisal part of the revaluation is what Vision Appraisal, that's a company we've hired for roughly $70,000 to $100,000 to conduct a survey here this year, state requirement. But the appraisal is what Vision Appraisal Company thinks your property is worth. Now you might go out and get another appraisal from a private appraiser or more than one different private appraisers, and they might come up with different numbers. In that case, you can go to the town after you get your number from Vision Appraisal, and you can go to Vision Appraisal first, and you can try to appeal by telling them, hey, you got too many bedrooms or not one too many bathrooms or something like that, or we don't really have an apartment on the second floor, it's a storage space, that kind of thing. You can do that, and if you don't get enough satisfaction there, you can go to the town appraisal process and talk to them, and if you don't like that, you can appeal to the state, as I understand it. But you can find all that out by talking to the town clerk in a town hall anytime they're open during the week. So that's what the appraisal is. The appraisal is what they think your property's worth. Not what you want to try to sell it for, not what you pay taxes on, but what they think the fair market value of your property is worth. And they get that by doing a survey of all properties sold in the area over the last X months or years, and they try to come up with some kind of a rough idea of what they think the properties have increased in value in this area or decreased in value in this area, depending upon good old supply and demand. But they go by figures. They get the figures mainly from the town hall. They have their own database as well. But they get the figures from the town, and you can go down and see all these figures, and that's what the fiscal conservatives have done. They've gone down and looked at all these numbers over many months, and they're trying to get a rough idea to appraise you of what might be the result of this reval. Now, we haven't had the majority do that. They haven't gone down. They might have gone down and studied it, but they sure as heck haven't told you what they thought it was going to be. So my view as a manager, businessman, CEO, COO, etc., is that no news is bad news. If they won't tell you, now we're pretty sure people down in the town hall know roughly what's happening here and what the new number is going to be. But they won't tell you. So you're lucky to have watchdogs like the Taxpayers Association, John Gauger, James Roberts, and people like that, keeping an eye on this whole thing for you as you do your daily business around the world, around the United States, and around Connecticut. Now, once the appraisal value is established, then they multiply by 70%. They take 70% of the appraisal value, and that value is called the assessed value. The assessed value, and it's on your card. If you go down to the town hall, tell them what your property address is, they'll give you a card which has all your details and some history information on it for previous owners and things. You can get that at the town hall from the assessor's office. So the assessment is 70%. So you take a calculator and you multiply the present mill rate, which I'll go over in a few more minutes, times your, first you get 70% of your appraised value, that's the assessed value, then you multiply by the mill rate, and you know how much tax you pay. Now, most of you know how much tax you pay anyway, because you just paid some a while back. You got a rough idea how much you pay. Now, the possible 21% that the fiscal conservatives are talking about, and I say possible, we don't know, it might be a little more, it might be a lot more, it might be a little less, it might be a lot less. But this is the G2 that we have so far, and they're looking at it pretty closely as time passes by. We'll know December 1 what that number really is, and we can begin to deal with it. Now, that number may change between now and the budget acceptance in 2013-14, because there will be appeals. It may change the value of that number. We may get more revenue in, etc. I'm going to talk about that in a few more minutes. So, but this year, we're still on the existing mill rate from 2007 plus any additions or subtractions that were made along the way over the last 5 years. So that's what it will be used in this year. Now, we all know that. We've all said that. Everybody's said it. They're trying to trick you, trying to hoodwink you, trying to pull the wool over your eyes by telling you other things. But that's not true. The possible 21% is the average amount that the fiscal conservative watchdogs, that's these fiscal conservatives that are keeping an eye on the process with Division Appraisal and properties sold over the years and months in the Winsted, Winchester, and Highland Lake. The watchdogs think the property values will decrease in value, not increase. When reval results become public on December 2012. That's the day when we'll know, give or take a week if the government delays it or allows us to have an exception, or, there's all kinds of things when you deal with bureaucracies, but that, if they don't do it in that sort of time frame, it'll be hard for them to do all the appraisals and get everybody organized for the 2013-14 tax year. And there'll be a lot of bantering. My view is, and that of a lot of other fiscal conservatives, is that if it is 21% on average, or even 10% or 12%, or more than 21%, it'll be very difficult to get any budgets approved for many years. Now, let me make another point here. The 21% is based upon a FY 13-14 budget with no increase for the town or the schools. A zero budget. No decrease, no increase. That's very important to know. If there is an increase or decrease, then it will be affected, and I'm going to take you through that here on the next slide, I think. Okay. Your taxes now, and I'm going to just show you, I got my little calculator here. I'm not going to use it today, but I got it here to show you, because you should have a little calculator. They cost $10, maybe $5, and you can calculate your own potential taxes if the reval is whatever percent it may be. And we'll go through that a little bit here tonight. I thought about having an open program where I asked people to call in and we would calculate their potential reval taxes. Then I said, oh, that could be pretty hairy. We'll get all kinds of crank calls and we won't know things. So I decided to say, well, okay, well, I'll give you the approach tonight, and then you can get more information if you need it from the town hall or from the Taxpayers Association, David LaPointe, who is now heading sort of, I don't think he's chairman anymore of the Taxpayer Association, but he's an advocate. And he helps people bend over backwards to help you if you need any help. Try and understand this whole thing. So your taxes now, fiscal year 2012, 2013, are based on the current mill rate. If you got a pencil, just jot it down. Mill rate is 25.43 mils. I checked it out with the assessor's office again today, because, to be honest with you, I keep forgetting it. I can't remember from 6 months to 6 months, but it's 25.43 mils. That's what they're talking about with a zero budget for this year, 2012, 2013. Your taxes in fiscal year 2013-14, that's next year, starting next year, July 1st was the next fiscal year, will be based on the reval results, and then again with a possible 21% increase on average for everybody that has property in this town, no matter what, personal property, houses, liquor stores, businesses, property, any property will be affected by that possible 21% increase. Now, if it's a little less, you'll be affected less. If it's a little more, you'll be affected more. We'll talk about that in a couple more minutes. Now, I've added to the 25.43, I've added 30.77 mills. I'm sorry, I added 21%. That brought the mill rate for next year, assuming it's 21%, up to 30.77 mills. So that's possibly what the mill rate could be if all other things are equal, which they probably won't be, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. So now, that 30.77 is a pretty high number. That's why people are turning these referendums down. That could be the worst case, maybe not. So how do we lower the possible 21% average, which will in turn, all things being equal, lower the 30.77 mills? Well, number one, obviously, if the reval turns out less, then the 21% average will be less. It'll be whatever the average number is from the reval. Or it could be more. Talk about that in a few minutes. So that's one of the ways that the reval number, 30.77 mills, can be reduced. Number two, if revenue is substantially increased, that will help. Because instead of getting it from the taxpayers, we'll have more taxpayers, i.e. more revenue, to spread the pain over, and that will help us to reduce the mill rate, all things being equal. If all things are equal, which they won't be, then the revenue increase, which I still think is the most important thing over the years, will help us with this mill rate. Now, that's very unlikely to substantially increase the additional profitable recurring tax revenue by next July. We might be able to get a little bit, but it's not going to be a substantial number. Because we don't have a pipeline. We don't have anything in the works. We can't tell you. We can't forecast it. We don't have a set of objectives. We don't have a plan. We don't have anything. So we're sitting here in the middle of the coldest winter ever in our town, probably 50 degrees below zero, with no clothes on. What can we expect? Number three, if expenses are substantially reduced, that will help. And there are plenty of ways, as we all know, that we can reduce expenses substantially because we have a lot of inefficiencies that were built up over the many good years that we've had in America, even though they haven't always been good here. We've had many good years, and in the good years, we built up things. We gave out all kinds of things and did all kinds of things that raised our expenses. Also, things have changed over the years. We don't have as many children in the school system anymore, but it still costs us a lot more money, et cetera, et cetera. We all think that we should try to reduce the expenses with the least effect at all on the workers in the town. They've been good to us, and we should be good to them. And there's plenty of ways we can do this. The best way, of course, is to raise more revenue. Then you'd be hiring more workers in the town. You wouldn't be trying to pare them down or anything like that, or review their medical plans, etc., or salary increases or benefits of any sort. And then number 4, a combination of 1, 2, and 3. There's n number of combinations here, but maybe it won't just be these 3 things. It'll be a combination, a little of each. Maybe the reval will turn out a little less. Maybe the revenue will be increased a bit. Maybe expenses will be reduced a bit. That's what we got to work hard on in this budget right now, this year's budget, so that we're ready for next year when the storm comes. So a combination of 1, 2, or 3. Now, you could also have a different mix, and that would be maybe the reval turns out to be a bit more than 21%, or the revenue turns out to be less than this year, and expenses turn out to be more because we've made promises already into the next few years. So there are various combinations, but that's basically what has to be done if we want to reduce that mill rate when we finally figure out what it is. Of course, the other way is for everybody to agree to the budget next year, which is not likely to happen even if it's 0. If we haven't raised the revenue and we can't manage the expenses and the reval turns out to be 21%, people will probably be looking for a negative, a decrease in the budget next year to be presented to the town budget meeting, annual town budget meeting. And there'll probably be a lot of people showing up at that budget meeting to request cuts in the budget, which you can do in the town budget meeting. Now we don't get enough people show up to do that. But when things are dark after the storm, next year, there'll be people there. They'll be madder than hatters because they will know the numbers. And the same thing will probably happen at referendum number 5. If all these facts come out, we don't, of course, have any forecast for next year for revenue or expenses. We don't know roughly what's going to be in that next year fiscal 13-14 budget. And normally what you do when you don't know is you just assume that what's in this year's budget will be the same next year and the following year until you can come up with some known quantities for increases or decreases. So the message that the fiscal conservatives are trying to give to the majority on the finance board is better start looking down the road. You better start working on these issues. Forget about building a new school for a while. Let's figure out how we're going to get out of this quicksand we're in first. Because the chances of getting money for a new school or a $12 million bond issue, once we get this reval information out in the open, is going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, in my opinion. Hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be. And then we'll see effect on the values of all the property in town, all the businesses, because the people don't have the money to spend in their businesses. We'll see all that. You'll see for yourself. And maybe I'll replay some of these programs going back to 2006 and I'll let you see all the warnings that people have given along the way. The next chart will do just the opposite of what I just went over. How can we raise the possible 21%? How can it be raised? We don't want to raise it, I'm sure. But how can it be raised? How can it be more than 21%? Well, I'll take care of the first. Well, first I better tell you the points, and then I'll give you a couple examples. But number one, if the reval turns out to be more on December 1st than the possible 21% average, and we don't manage it back through appeals and all, then it could be more than 21%. We always said on the other slide that it could be less. Well, it could be more as well. So, we'll know on December 1. Hence, vote no for referendum number 4. Let's get the facts. Let's find out exactly where we stand. Take the wool off your eyes if you have it there. Most people don't have it a wool over their eyes because they are wise to this whole thing, and they know they've been educated by these fiscal conservatives enough to know that somebody's trying to pull the wool over their eyes, so they're very cautious about that. That's why they voted the 3 referendums down in the first place. And probably will vote the 4th referendum down as well. Not sure. Nobody knows for sure. Depends a lot on absentee ballots. Everybody's fighting for absentee ballots. Depends a lot upon people in town waking up to the fact that it's going to cost them. We'll talk a bit about that tonight. Number 2, revenue is substantially decreased. That could happen. If we don't get in the same amount of revenue we get this year, we get a lot less next year for one reason or another. Nobody builds any houses. We don't get any more profitable recurring revenue. We lose some. Then it's possible that we would need more unless we, at the same time, pare back the budget, which we never seem to want to do. And then the third thing is expenses are substantially increased. 3% increases on salaries. We never seem to know what the medical expenses are going to be and the benefits until we get hit with a big bill each year. I can't forecast that too well, although good businessmen would forecast it. They would take the average of the last 10 years and they would take the projections over the last 10 years and they would extrapolate them and they take a rough cut at what it would be next year. So there are plenty of ways that expenses could be substantially increased, and that will be a problem for the mill rate. Now, by the way, the next revaluation will be 5 years from now. So whatever mill rate we get now, we'll have, plus any increases or decrease from year to year budgeting process until 5 years from now. And seeing the mill rate decrease in the budget process, that's unusual around here. So number 4 is that a combination of these could happen, causing an increase. For example, the reval may turn out to be more, a little bit, or it may be even, or it may be a little less, but the revenue could be decreased more, or the revenue could be increased a little bit, and the reval turn out to be a little less. And expenses are substantially increased. If we increase the expenses, then we could possibly raise that mill rate. And then again, it's a combination of 1, 2, and 3 that cause the increase. Now, I want to point out to you that once the slide starts, once we get the number and everybody faces the fact that we got this possible 21%, that's like a magnet to draw the finance board together and all the commissions together and the taxpayers together and the business people together and everybody else around here looking out for the best for Winsted. That'll draw them together. They might have to do a lot of meetings behind closed doors and executive session because they might be hitting themselves with bottles and things, but that's going to be a magnet to draw them together, force them to come up with a plan for success, and then, hence, be able to get things done. The name of my 2 programs, Planning for Success and Getting Things Done. So, now, that won't be a pretty process. It'll be like after the '55 flood. It won't be an easy process, but it will pull people together, and they will have to work for the common good. And if they can't, then hopefully others will be voted in who can do so. It's hard here because a lot of the taxpayers from, say, the town, the lake, and Winchester are not here when we vote for selectmen and Board of Education members. But depending upon what this outcome is on December 1, it's a big, 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 big event for this town. And we should wait for it by voting no for referendum number 4, and then dealing with the real problem, the real facts. And if they turn out to be no problem whatsoever, we'll all be very, very happy. But nobody's predicting that. That's not likely. This is likely to be a big turning point for Winsted, Winchester, and the lake. And it's going to happen. Now let's talk a bit about downtown, because there's a lot of wool being pulled over the people who live downtown, a lot of wool being pulled over their eyes right now. And right now, your house is worth X, we'll say, an appraised value, hence 70% of it's the assessed value. That's what you pay your taxes on. After the reval, and I'm exaggerating just a bit here to make the point, make the numbers easy for you people that are watching. Let's say your house goes down by 40% in value when these numbers come out, on average. Some will be higher or lower, blah, 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 but on average. And if you watch James Roberts' program tonight, Effective, Affordable, etc., I think it's on about 6 or 6:30. He and John Glauger will explain all this to you. Have a handkerchief ready because you might cry. Don't eat before because you might get sick. But they'll go over this with you and tell you roughly what the numbers are saying now about the downtown values. Now let's assume that you have an apple now, and just to make it easier, instead of using 40%, I'm going to say you'll have a half an apple after the reval. Your house will be worth half as much. Therefore, if you go to sell it, it'll be very difficult for anybody to buy it to get bank financing. It'll be very difficult for anybody to sell it because they might have a higher mortgage, or it might be their life savings, or it might be a big investment for them, which it probably shouldn't be, but it probably is. And if they're owners of apartment houses, then they'll have to raise the rent on the people that are in the apartments to pay for it all, or they'll have to neglect their property, which we don't want them to do. They will neglect giving money to charities. I mean, this thing is pretty bad stuff. So we want to make sure that everybody in town realizes, don't let them pull the wool over your eyes, this affects everybody in town. Even those whose value is, say, 50% less than it is now. Now, it won't be that. It'll be somewhere between probably 30, 40% on average, maybe even a little less. But I'm trying to make a point here and show you how the system works. Now, should you have that, then guess what happens? You will pay the new mill rate, assuming it's 21%. I said the mill rate would be 30. Let me look at it here. 30.77 mils. That'll be the mill rate will be multiplied times your half property. But I want you to understand that in that mill rate will be a 21% increase. If the mill rate were not increased for next year, then you would pay 21% less in your taxes, even though your house is only worth half as much. But if we do have the mill rate increase of an average of 21%, you will pay, in addition to what you would be paying for a zero increase, you will pay an additional 21%. And you'll do that for at least 5 years, plus any other money they want. That's for a zero budget, by the way. as I said earlier. So you'll do that for at least 5 years till there's another revaluation. If you still own the house by then and it's not foreclosed on, or the business, it's not foreclosed on, or not subject to a short sale or anything like that, or you don't have to give it away for a cheap price, perhaps less than you paid for it. So the properties downtown will be very, very, very much affected. Now, they'll be more affected now by this mill rate than anything else, because it's now. It's going to happen now. It's December 1, in effect in July. I hear some of the majority of the Board of Finance, the 5 majority members, have been telling people that, you know, their values, they're going to get a decrease in their mill rate. Well, it could still be a decrease from the present mill rate, but you'll be paying 1% more than you should pay if we had a zero budget, because we were getting more revenue in or cutting expenses or anything like that. So there are many towns in Connecticut that just won't go above a certain mill rate. If it gets to 21, they say, that's it, we're going to cut, or we're going to go get more revenue. We're going to do whatever we have to do, but we're not going to just keep raising the mill rate. Connecticut is used to mill rates going up and property values going up. This last few years has been an exception. So be aware that everybody will be affected no matter where you stand in this whole process. Even if you're a renter, even if you own a car, it'll go up 21% if the mill rate goes up. Because the personal property tax is based on the current mill rate. And as soon as the new one becomes effective, up it goes, all the personal property taxes as well. So be aware, business people, and if I were a businessman, I'd vote no if you have the power to vote. It's a little tricky. I don't know exactly who can vote and who can't vote when it comes to LLCs and trusts and all that kind of thing. But you should check at the town hall, find out if you were eligible to vote, if your children are eligible, or any other people in your house are eligible to vote, or in your family, extended family, wherever, and get them down there, get them to vote. Now let's just talk a bit about Highland Lake and Winchester. Got a little slide for that. The people in that area, those areas, their property values have either gone up a little, gone down a little, or stayed pretty much the same. They haven't taken the big hit that the downtown properties have taken over the last few years in value. There haven't been as many foreclosures there. There haven't been any short sales. There aren't as many problems in that respect. And there are still people willing to pay the revenue to buy the properties there. So we expect that to be about even. Watch James Roberts' program following this. And he and John Gauger will go over the numbers with you. And you'll get a better feel. But basically, people who live at Highland Lake and around in the Lake District, I guess, and people who live in Winchester will have to pick up for and pay for the lack of taxes from downtown, because they'll be paying less. They'll be paying more than they should be by 21%, but they'll be paying less than these other two areas, Highland Lake and Winchester. These people are pretty savvy. I'm sure a lot of them are voting no. They understand. They've been through it in their businesses. They've been through it in their families. And they know that when times get rough, you have to hunker down a little bit. And they know that the wool is there and it's being tried to be pulled over their eyes, but they've seen that before. It happens every day in business. Somebody tries to pull wool over your eyes. You get to the point where you can see it coming. And you can build up a resistance, and you can take actions to make sure it doesn't happen. So that's where the lakes are. That's where the more affluent people are. Not all. There are some affluent people in Winsted as well. And there's some affluent businesses and businessmen and business people that even work outside of the area but live here. So they're going to be drowning in property taxes. Not good. Make more resistant to agreeing to any increases in future years unless they see how their money is spent and is it spent wisely. They'll be asking simple questions, very simple questions, like why are the number of students going down so rapidly over the years and the cost per student is going up? Why do we have 2 superintendents, one and a half superintendents instead of 1, like most other towns do? Now, there are a couple that have 2 where they have private schools, but that's very, very few in the state of Connecticut, 1 or 2 others. Why do we have 3 different computer systems in town? Why not have only 1? Why do we have the maintenance spread around different organizations? Why not one maintenance organization? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of those kind of things, and some of those, again, will be mentioned on James Roberts' program following this one tonight with John Gauger. We don't always agree on everything. You won't always agree on everything, but you'll get the drift. You'll get the idea. And this is the most painful part. The simplest part is getting more additional, recurring, profitable tax revenue into town. We've fumbled many chances to do that, many over the 50 years, many. I hear all kinds of stories about companies that wanted to come here, but one way or another never got here because of all the red tape involved, the tremendous expense involved, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no easy answer. You can't say, if we improve this, by the way, the test scores are always questioned as well in our town. And the Connecticut Magazine ranks us pretty low in our little grouping from year to year. So nobody can deny any of that. But that's been going on for years. And we haven't been able to do anything about it. The Board of Selectmen and Finance Board just the other night agreed to send a letter to the state saying, hey, we like this college we got in this town. Please don't fumble it. That'll be in the public record. Last thing we want are any problems there. Come along quite nicely. So we're going to have a problem here. And most of it will be felt by the businessmen in town because of personal property taxes and the buildings they own, by the lack of cash in taxpayers' pockets because they're giving it all to the town instead of spending it in their businesses. They'll be going elsewhere to buy things. That in turn will mean new businesses won't want to come to town. It'll be tougher to get budgets passed, be very difficult. We'll have to pay attention. Now, the good part is it'll probably focus the Finance Board. My own view is they have to take power into their own hands. They have to give direction. They have to review progress against objectives. And they have to make decisions to make sure we do get things done. There's no other way to do it. It's not working the way it is. Too hard to change the charter. Take years and years. That came up at the select meeting the other night to do anything. Takes years. You got to go through boards, commissions, public meetings, public hearings, voting on election days. It would only happen every 4 years, that kind of thing, or maybe every 2 years, I don't know. But anyway, I can't over stress here the importance of voting on October 27th and voting no, let's wake them up. It's like throwing a pail of cold water on their head. It'll wake them up. They'll have to get together and figure out how to get out of this pickle that they never wanted to get into in the first place. Now remember, this majority was elected by the townspeople when 60% or more of the lake residents weren't even here and aren't able to vote. They vote in other towns around America and probably outside of America at the major elections. They're not allowed to vote here. But they are allowed to vote in all the tax referendums. So you get this real set of extremes. You get people who put in the big spenders as major finance board members, some of whom have no experience or very little experience in managing anything, and are mainly interested in the school system and spending more money in the school system, not very interested in how do we get the money to do that. Oh, we'll take it from the lake. We'll take it from Winchester. We'll take it from the business owners. We'll raise the taxes. Well, that's going to stop. It's not going to be as easy to do it, and they're going to have to figure that out. So I'm going to put up my bad budget sign again. I put it up on the last program. This is a bad budget. Doesn't help the efforts to reduce the possible reval 21%. Tax increase, vote no, October 27 or before you go home if you're a part-time resident here and can't and are leaving. You should vote, because you can vote on these budget issues. Vote before you go, absentee ballot. And we may know more by referendum number 5. We certainly may, because that's going to be not probably before December 1st. They probably won't be able to have a referendum by charter before December 1st. If this fails, number 4. Next slide is if the revow was going to be good news. We probably know by now. It would have leaked out of town hall. I'm pretty sure people in the town hall got a rough idea from Vision Appraisal. We employ them. If we ask them questions, they should give us answers. We could hedge it. We could say we don't know for sure, like I'm doing on this program, but they haven't done it. That means there's trouble a-brewing. There's trouble a-brewing. Storm clouds are in the air. Vote no again. Initial reval facts should come by December 1. That's the key date. Vote no. And then lastly, I want to show you a slide, a picture I used on my programs years ago. That's a bunch of lemmings. Those lemmings are following their leaders over the cliff. And we don't want to follow our leaders over the cliff. Our leaders, the 5 in the majority on the Board of Finance, forget about their selectmen responsibilities, but on the Board of Finance, which should be apolitical and watch out for our financial future, like somebody does in every family for that family, and every business for that business. We don't want to be led over the cliff by this majority on the Finance Board. So vote no. Thank you very much for watching the program. Stay tuned for James Roberts. And then I think Jay Buttahazy on after that. He'll have some things. They're both fiscal conservatives. John Gauger will guest. Thank you very much.